Okay, great. Hey guys, how's it going? I had been talking to no one for a few minutes there, but I am now live. I'm sorry about that. Um, totally messed that up, but that's fine. Welcome to Comic Island, and today we're talking about Black Adam. That's actually kind of good because it lets me ease into this a little bit better. My partner and I saw it last night and quite enjoyed it. But we'll do a full review in just a second. Um, and I apologize for being a little late, but I was sitting here at 3:15 talking to nothing for a good few minutes before I realized I hadn't pressed go live on YouTube. But it's been a little while, so maybe that explains it. If you see him in the background, he is kind of sitting over there. That is Kingsley. We're just dog sitting right now, and hi, buddy. Um, he's just gonna be chilling out. He looks distressed for some reason, but it's probably just because I'm talking to nothing, and that's a curiosity for the puppy. Yeah, he's walking around a bit. Okay, we're just gonna lie down there then. But he might be around during this stream, and maybe even a couple more if I can squeeze them in today, which would be awesome. Um, Oh, okay. I was gonna say I wanted to just check everything was working on YouTube, and it looks like a bunch of people are on, which is great. And it does seem to be connected. I'm not getting a ton of feedback from YouTube right now, but everything seems to be working. So if anything is wrong or you can't hear me for some reason, just let me know. But Black Adam, um, I guess we'll start pretty spoiler light, and then as the video goes on, I guess I'll do more spoilers. That's always been a weird point for me because while it makes sense for a pre recorded video, if we're live, it's a little harder to account for spoilers and stuff, so I usually am less concerned about it. And that's going to be tough. I'll just say that. I'll try to avoid maybe some of the bigger twists. I think I can do that when talking about the movie. At some point, we're going to have to talk about that post-credit scenes and it's spoilery, so I'm just going to put a more generic spoiler thing at the start for people watching it later to maybe be cautious of that. But we're kind of closing out the opening weekend of the movie, anyways, so it's not the end of the world to start talking about these things, hopefully. I'm not going to get too much into all of that either. It's at least from the start of this review, so we'll try and do that because I really liked it. I uh, wasn't necessarily sure what to expect. I didn't really dig into much about who was directing it, the actors behind each of the parts, looking into like every little character that might show up in the movie. I had seen enough of like the trailers and stuff to know that the Justice Society was in it. I knew Pierce Brosnan was playing Dr. Fate. I obviously knew Dwayne Johnson was playing Black Adam and so on and so forth. But I think at the core of me, I was more uh, just trying to kind of set myself up not for disappointment or for like being overwhelmingly impressed, but just kind of go into it with a bit of a neutral stance, knowing a lot about Black Adam as a comic book fan and having read most, if not arguably all, Black Adam comics ever written. I actually kind of have been digging into this character a little bit recently, and because of the nature of his publication history, it isn't actually too hard to do that. So, with someone having that perspective, I have to say I was pretty thoroughly impressed. As an introduction to Black Adam as a character, it's one of the best examples of a story I've ever seen, if not the outright best. As an overall Black Adam story, I would argue it is easily competitive with his role in 52 in World War III, or even the current series with Christopher Priest, or some of the better JSA comic story arcs written by Jeff Johns back in the day, of which quite a few heavily featured Black Adam. I think it really lives up to so much of that comic book legacy, whether it's the fact like they have little details such as Adam Smasher is in this movie, and if you know this character from the comics, like there's a ton of examples of Adam Smasher and Black Adam forming a friendship over the course of these JSA books and gradually having this tremendous amount of respect for each other. Especially, there's just some really great moments I remember with Black Adam really like stepping out on a limb for Smasher, it feels like, and giving this character the benefit of the doubt because they have this respect. So there's that comic book history, and they have little nods to it in the movie. Like, really detailed, intimate little things about Black Adam that they got right, I guess, but I wouldn't have even considered essential for a Black Adam movie. I liked the JSA edition. I think what they served is they addressed the fact that Black Adam is existing in this larger superhero world without crowding the movie and letting the focus still be on Teth-Adam. And I thought that was all really astute. What I was thinking about a lot when watching the movie is how cool it managed to combine like 4 or 5 different Black Adam stories, especially those JSA ones, but also quite a few dealing with his origins and stuff, and then kind of blending it all together into something sincerely new that like lives up to the spirit of the character and what people like about the comic book character, but also kind of its own flavor. Like the details of this Black Adam's origins and how he relates to like his people and the history of all that is, a little bit different than any version of him in the comics, but it, I feel like, is a nice representation of his collective comic book history as a character and stuff. And he is a fascinating character. So what I like about Black Adam is he is a character kind of positioned in power like Captain Marvel or Shazam, but not afraid to push against that morality a little bit and really explore those ideas. He is a true hero to his people, I find, in the comics, even if that does come in the form of autocracy a lot, and also him violently murdering people. It's interesting that the film version kind of seems to be pushing away from just taking over as nobility, and Teth-Adam kind of represents something a little different in the films because of that. But I liked that. I think, it's not necessary for like a film adaptation of the character. They could have probably worked with Black Adam being a little bit harsher, but because he's the main character of this story and not just sort of the pseudo antagonist of a bunch of JSA and crossover books, it does kind of make sense as a slight change, but also it leads to some interesting twists along the way. And Black Adam being a former slave, I think, will be useful in his perspective going forward as this character in the larger DCEU. I was reading something pretty interesting this morning about Dwayne Johnson was in an interview and he was talking about how he views, and perhaps even people in the larger like Warner Bros. Studio view, this is sort of I guess soft reboot of the DCEU, and we're sort of pushing ever so slightly towards us like kind of having something along the lines of the MCU, with this kind of being an almost Iron Man like movie that's going to be used as a jumping on point for things in the future, which is strange because we've been doing this with DC over and over again, it feels like, with all these new jumping on points. But with Black Adam, I felt pretty good about that and kind of understood what they meant. And that's especially true if you've seen the post-credit scenes, which got such a big reaction from the audience. And I was surprised too. I will say that. I thought that character was never going to appear, especially played by that actor, ever again. And I am curious where they're going with all of this. Mr. DC Comics, thanks for joining us in chat. I see you there. And then the other thing that I keep thinking about, like, especially after the movie ended, like, and we're waiting for the post-credit scene, and even just, like, kind of walking out of the theater, is a few times in theaters now I've seen that trailer for the next Shazam movie, and it really seems as though Black Adam is not a part of that story. He might have a cameo. I would be really surprised if he had no cameo in the Shazam movie, but the whole side of Black Adam being like the main villain of Shazam 2 and it being these characters immediately clashing does not seem to be in the cards, which is fascinating to me. Mr. DC Comics is saying it is a soft reboot because new people are in charge of Warner Bros. That's interesting. I noticed at the very start of the movie, if you look at the opening logos, I think it was like New Line Cinema, and then it's like a, what was it? A Time Warner Discovery production or something along those lines to reflect that new merger. And I did encode that while I was seeing it, like, oh, so this change has happened, and this is the first time I'm seeing it in a film, which is pretty cool. So that was that's interesting, and I guess that is the case, and they are kind of taking it in a new direction. It seems as though like the guy at the very top doing all of this Warner Bros. Discovery merger stuff has made a lot of questionable decisions with them scrapping the Batgirl movie entirely and stuff like that. But, you know, a lot of that criticism and speculation revolves around a movie we haven't seen, and we have seen Black Adam. And if this is the caliber of movies DC is going to be making going forward, and it also reminded me a lot of the Batman from earlier this year in terms of just really impressing me and kind of, I feel, leading the way against Marvel this year. Marvel, so we have had Doctor Strange and Thor Love and Thunder, and then the Batman and Black Adam all come out this year, and it really feels like comparing DC's to Marvel's two movies shows a pretty clear difference this year. I don't, I have no, well, I do, I guess, prefer Marvel's characters and stories, like on a personal level, but I have no horse in the game. I just want to enjoy good comic book movies. But I like Doctor Strange enough this year, like the Multiverse of Madness and stuff, but I'm like thinking about these four different experiences I've had over the year, like Batman, Doctor Strange, Thor Love and Thunder, and then this. DC's experiences were pretty consistently more fun to me. I definitely had fun with Doctor Strange and had significantly less fun with Love and Thunder, but I didn't hate any of these movies. It just really feels like DC has stepped up their game this year, and I can appreciate that. They're raising the bar in a way Marvel has been struggling with lately. They're not completely out of the game. For those of you who saw the Disney Plus special Werewolf by Night, I would recommend it. I enjoyed it a lot, and that's the kind of thing I want to see more out of Marvel because it's so different and interesting and it's just basically from start to finish an homage to the classic horror movies of like the early film era in the 30s and 40s, that sort of thing, and I was all over that. DC Comics was saying the Batman was great, but a bit too long. I mean, I don't disagree with you there. I don't know how what you guys have an equivalent of this in the U.S. or whatever, but we had like VIP seats where you have more leg space, much more comfortable seat, and even they like serve you food and stuff for the Batman. And we were still suffering at the end with multiple endings going on, my girlfriend and I. And it's not that we disliked the Batman. It is one of those things where I do feel I would have probably enjoyed and appreciated that movie a lot more with a home release because, like we're just watching it at home, just because it was so long and has so many endings. Like we both had to go to the bathroom, and Gotham City's flooding during the ending. It was a bit of an issue, and I've talked about that before when we were reviewing the Batman. But it's something that I didn't feel for Black Adam. Like kind of right when it was starting to get long, you can really tell the movie is starting to wrap up anyways, and it's just over 2 hours. It really felt like the perfect length to me. I think any shorter and it would have felt too short. Any longer and it definitely would have felt too long. DC Comics is saying, it wouldn't be surprised if The Rock Studio 7 Bucks Productions have a more significant role in the future of WB. Well, again, they did a good job. You can kind of tell, and maybe that's why the movie threw me off a little bit in terms of its direction, and not in a way I disliked. It was just, it's so different from most other comic book movies we see. But they make heavy use of slow motion in a way I didn't feel was overblown or cliched, but rather to just evoke how fast Black Adam is. And I loved that so much. Between how they bent that with the music, which I thought was really interesting and kept me engaged because it used a lot of like modern music, but also weird cover takes of them where you'll hear the guitar riff of Painted Black for the vast majority of the use of that song, and then it comes in just a little bit more when they go into this big slow-mo shot and Black Adam's like flying through an explosion kind of scenario. I know it's a much more complicated scene than that. I'm just trying to briefly describe it, but I will happily attribute that difference to maybe The Rock being able to have a bit more creative control over this project and using some of his like Fast and Furious connections maybe to make something like this. But god damn, did it look awesome. And the other thing, I think the thing that I felt most when watching this movie, or at least was in the back of my mind the most, is like it consistently had me laughing at jokes left and right. I was talking to my girlfriend, she had to go, so because we talked about like she might have potentially joined us for this stream, but they were a little busy with stuff today and didn't really feel like it, which is fine. So Sabrina's not here today, but before she left, we were talking about how we both really loved that scene where Black Adam's watching TV for a second when he kind of wakes up for the first time in the 21st century, and he just zaps it with his lightning and just goes, "Ugh, wizards," and the whole audience laughed. But I love that, and there's a bunch of jokes along those lines. There's a great recurring bit where this kid wants Black Adam to have like one-liners and be more traditional superhero, and he even tries it at one point, hurls this guy to the ground while they're flying, and he's like, "Tell them the men in black," and then before he can even finish his like catchphrase, the guy's just dead. And Teth-Adam sees that and is just like, oh, okay. Like, and he kind of gets better at it over time. It's such a great bit. It really, like, for a movie that's, I would argue, very serious and takes its source material seriously and doesn't make a joke out of stuff like Honda, Teth-Adam's character, or even the Justice Society, though they are the source of jokes sometimes, especially Adam Smasher, who's definitely our kind of token, not token, was it like the source of humor? There's a word for it, I'm forgetting, and it was in my head a second ago, but whatever. Adam Smasher is like kind of the jokey character, but even then there's some depth to him. I like that they introduced the idea that he burns a lot of calories to use his powers, and then we later constantly see him eating without it. Like, it's used as a joke here and there, but it's not acknowledged a lot. They don't have the line of dialogue saying, "Hey, why are you doing this?" and then he repeats that he eats a lot. It's just they reference it earlier and then they pay it off later as a joke. And so throughout all that, this movie's having me laughing all the time, and also, like I said, taking itself seriously, and I think it does its dramatic side really well too. It's not like the most serious drama in the world, but it is about fascism and what to do with fascists, and it does explore that morality in a very interesting way. So all of this is happening. We have a movie with a lot of serious elements that I think are making some very solid points, especially for what is, you know, a comic book movie and not necessarily the most serious thing in the world. But it does take that stuff seriously, and I think it pays off because of it, because it feels like there's real stakes. And when there are consequences to all of that, and we get to the ending of this movie, and you know, it's not all just everyone, like the good guys get what they want without there being any cost or sacrifice to the bad guys. I felt it. I felt this ending. I wasn't sobbing or anything, but I felt bad for the bad things that happened and good for the victories. Which is a really fun way to describe it, spoiler free, but I think you guys will know what I mean there. And I really think so. Sorry, I keep trying to make one point and I keep circling around it. So, but we have Black Adam, which really did both comedy and drama really well. And all I could think about, and it is in the title of this video, like, this movie, Black Adam here, makes Thor Love and Thunder look like wet garbage. And I know that's a bit of a line, but that I just kept thinking about it. It's like, wow, this movie really makes Love and Thunder look bad. And I get that these movies and these companies shouldn't be constantly contrasted with each other, and they should have the space to exist. I think a good example of that is the MCU doing something like Werewolf by Night. Doesn't really mean that DC should feel obligated to do the exact same kind of thing with like Frankenstein or something like that. Um, what it does mean, and what I think is interesting about it, is Black Adam and Thor very much do feel like comparable characters and comparable dynamics. You have a story that's much more out there than something like the Batman, and a lot less grounded because we have all these big powers. And where Love and Thunder never took itself seriously and packed itself so full of jokes that it felt far less funny, in a very interesting paradox. But it's, comedy is about timing and also contrast and dichotomies. So if there's nothing serious about Love and Thunder, even though there should have been, with Jane Foster getting cancer and Gore the God Butcher existing, it really seems like Black Adam just took Love and Thunder to school, and probably on a significantly lower budget. You have Love and Thunder with all these different settings, going around all these different places, and even featuring like a full appearance of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And it came across as kind of cheap and disappointing almost in comparison to Black Adam, which relies on similar sets. Like, we keep revisiting this one family's apartment on a few occasions. You can tell that the same street sets are used on a few occasions, and even the same, like, kind of background actors, will say. There's a sort of recurring element to all of that, which obviously is done to save money and that sort of thing. And the cast is smaller, less big names attached to Black Adam. Like, obviously we have The Rock, but beyond that, then, it's much more limited and contained. But it's used more effectively. So that apartment I mentioned that we keep going to, this kid has this cool thing because Kondak has been in a dictatorship so long. This boy has this cool little compartment he pulls up out of his desk drawer, and he can slide right out, and it's like a second escape, like it's a second exit to their apartment, which is really brilliant, especially because an adult can't really fit through it. And they introduce it as a casual thing early on, but it ends up kind of paying off a few times throughout the story, and I really liked that. DC Comics, I'm just going to call it that, is saying Hawkman versus Black Adam were my favorite two characters in the movie. Multiple great battles. Yeah, I enjoyed them too. I thought Hawkman's actor, he stood out in a movie with all these fantastic performers, and Pierce Brosnan is like a heavyweight and will always stand out in scenes and stuff, in spite of all of that. And I've seen him in other stuff. I need his name because I cannot think of it for the life of me right now. But I thought he was so great. I also recognized the guy who plays Atom Smasher from the show I used to watch called The Fosters that I thought was pretty fun. Why do they have that name in the cast list? That's a huge spoiler I just saw that I obviously know about, but that shouldn't be getting it. Oh, okay, so Aldous Hodge, whose name sounds familiar, and I know I've seen in a bunch of stuff before, but I couldn't place while I was watching it, so I am looking him up on Wikipedia right now. Okay, he was in Straight Outta Compton. I remember that. And stuff I haven't seen. Oh, and he voices Jon Stewart in Green Lantern Beware My Power, which I think I have seen. That might explain why his voice was a little familiar. I feel like I know him from television. Oh yeah, he played Jake in Supernatural for 2 episodes, and that's what I remember. Oh, and he was in the Black Museum episode of Black Mirror. Okay. Oh, and he was that guy in Calypso. Okay. Okay, I'm starting to place him. I thought he was great. Being able to go toe to toe with Black Adam, even though he's like a slimmer guy, he managed to pull that off and have that presence and also just have that physicality. Obviously, he's aided by all the nth metal and alien artifacts and superpowers that Hawkman has, but it felt natural. And he felt like a good rival to Black Adam. It's really cool that there is a villain in this movie, but he's not really the main source of conflict. It's more of Black Adam and Hawkman, which really stands out in the movie on a few levels. We'll get into why in a second, but also it's neat. Like, it's about a sort of antagonism, and both men do want what's best for Kondak, and Hawkman's even really quick to recognize the problem with him being there. He's called out at one point while Atom Smasher's knocking down this giant statue in their city and stuff, and he realizes, like, yes, we haven't been here, and I've never set foot in this country throughout all of its dictatorship, and now we're showing up because Black Adam's here trying to do something about it. and it just comes across as super hypocritical, and he knows it. And that's something I really liked about this character. When we are first introduced to him and he's talking to oh, what's her face? Oh no, why am I blanking on stuff like this? Um, the Wall, Amanda Waller. It's like I could think of her nickname. I wasn't sure where we were going with this character because I was like, oh, like Amanda Waller's dispatching them. That's a really interesting distinction, and it's kind of like, is Black Adam going to join the Suicide Squad, or are we going to see the Suicide Squad for a second? And I wasn't sure where we were going with all of that, but it ended up just kind of being an introduction to Hawkman and his character, like, and the Justice Society have their own perspective on everything, and they aren't just towing Waller's line. They kind of do see the conflict and can respect Black Adam's perspective, which really mirrors their relationship with Black Adam in the comics. And I quite appreciated all of that too. One other thing I liked about Hawkman, and I'm not sure if everyone else picked up on this detail, but his plane was so cool. It's all made out of nth metal, which is a big part of Hawkeye's thing, but a beautiful detail I like about it. And maybe this is in the comics and I just haven't read enough Hawkman books or whatever, but I love how the plane moves like a bird. It's a weird detail, but it's just so it's so interestingly constructed, and it's kind of modeled after its own thing, which it should be, because Hawkman and Hawkwoman are like aliens, basically, we'll say, without getting into all the details of that. So that really worked for me, and I thought it also worked because at the start of the movie, Black Adam's just slaughtering everyone in Intergang, which is a cool detail that they're like kind of really the main villains of the story, but they stand no chance at him at first. And then, sure enough, once the Justice Society shows up, and then once another character gets these powers, he has people who can actually stand up to him a little bit. And I thought that was a cool detail. At one point, Hawkman says, oh yeah, this entire plane's made out of nth metal, nothing should be able to break it. And I was curious where we were going with that, because I was like, well, are they going to destroy it then? Because they just said you can't. And it is interesting how they use that as like, because Hawkman has like nth metal armor and stuff, he's able to stand up to Black Adam a little bit, fully taking the guy's lightning when it destroys most things it encounters. So this movie gets so many details really well done. But another thing that something that DC Comics said about like how many great battles there were, while I enjoyed that about the movie too, it is something my girlfriend actually complained about, and I think they are entitled to that, and it's just an interesting trend, I know, or just I really made note of that because it's not a bad thing, but it's an interesting contrast to how she reacted to most of these other movies that we've watched. And the reality is, the more that we've talked about this, and then she did that video recently where she had to recreate the whole MCU from memory, and you can see that on our channel, or at least like the first phase, but we're going to do the whole thing. And what I got from making that video and stuff is that she, and I'm guessing a lot of other people are like this, but she tends to encode stuff more about these relationships between characters and stuff, and the action tends to do like she almost checks out. And when I took film study in university, one thing I really took note of when we were learning about action films is that a lot of those movies tend to structure themselves where they're like musicals, and you have these scenes of plot, everyone's talking, and then we go into our big musical number and everyone's singing and dancing, and generally the singing and dancing bits have a lot less to do with reality and a lot less to do with the story, and are kind of more of these entertaining breaks in between the actual story. Now that's not true of all musicals, and that's not true of all action movies, but most action movies do function the same way. We have our story, action scene where not much of significance happens. It might just be a car chase taking our characters from point A to point B. That's just made more exciting because they're being chased. It might be something more sophisticated, like the final battle at the end of any comic book movie. Black Adam, I would argue, isn't like that, but I would argue it's in its favor. Black Adam tends to use a lot more of its action scenes to tell a story. So at the beginning, when Black Adam's killing all these soldiers, our main lady character is trying to run away and she's almost crushed by rocks, and Black Adam, barely even sparing it a thought or giving her much attention, zaps the rocks and saves her life. And that moment is actually directly referred to by her later in a way that I thought was so interesting. Like it's used to show the heroic side of this man who is just waking up from nothing, is all distorted and doesn't know what's going on. It's been like 5,000 years, and he still saves her. And that's her point that she's making. And I think that's so interesting. And then that same action scene, these intergangs start shooting at Black Adam. He catches one of the bullets and he's looking at it and he's trying to figure out what it is. It's so interesting. No dialogue here. But you can just tell, oh, of course, this guy's from ancient Egypt times. It's not exactly that, but it's the same time period, I believe. Well, no, I know, not believe. So he's looking at this bullet and he's like, your magic is weak. And that's how he interprets it. And I thought it was so great. And then he just starts slaughtering them left and right. All of that, I think, was done so well, and just like flushed with these interesting details to it that really make the movie stand out to me. And it's also like, I only saw this last night, so the more I'm talking about it, the more I'm reviewing it and starting to pick apart stuff and be like, well, this is what worked about it and this is what I liked about it, the more I'm starting to really appreciate this movie. But like I was saying, my girlfriend found it a little action heavy, and I think so many people are programmed to look at these action movies this certain way. And I was kind of talking about that to her. I was like, well, what I liked about all the action, though, is how it kept pushing the story forward. There's not an action scene in Black Adam that is entirely pointless, except for maybe one near the end where he's fighting his way out of the cell. But it's not even that big a deal. Like, it's just used to kind of make that moment a little more dramatic. And I liked it. It's well shot, and it's interesting. It didn't take me out of the story much. It's one of those things when you think about it a little bit, it's like, yeah, Dr. Fate could have probably just freed Black Adam a little more easily than he did, but it's just used to raise the stakes. And also, just a little moment they threw in where Teth-Adam doesn't have his powers and has to fight his way out of something, which I also appreciated, because I was like, well, he has no advantage here. He's fighting dudes in body armor, and he's basically in underwear, and it's all just the Rock being the Rock kind of thing. And I liked that. I really liked this movie. It's definitely going to be competitive for a long time in terms of like one of my favorite DC movies. I don't actually know what a lot of other people think about it. I've heard mostly good things. I've heard a lot of energy and excitement around the post-credit scenes, and I kind of expressed that myself when we were talking about that. Yeah, that's the end of like my thoughts, but I'll keep pulling in chat and stuff and see what else comes out. But let's see here. So DC Comics was saying Thor is acting more like Shazam. Oh, that's a good point. Shazam is the one that is extremely popular back in the day and was always more comedic. You know what? That's such a good point, because yeah, so I've thought about that before in a different context, but I really do think that if you were to like what's it called? Zachary Taylor, I think his name is, but the guy who plays Shazam was talking about potentially doing a crossover with Thor, and people were joking around about it, but I kind of get what he's getting at, because these two family of characters, like Thor and the Shazam Captain Marvel-y world, including Black Adam, do feel very similar and are often kind of going for very similar things. They kind of lean a little more in the magical direction, and they both represent these powerhouse figures where you can't have them fighting crooks the entire time because they're just so powerful it wouldn't work. And they also have like these larger than life worlds beyond just Earth that you can visit. Like they both have these realms that are all laid out in different books and stuff. But I agree with what Mr. DC Comics in chat there is saying, that Thor, especially historic comic book character Thor, the one from like the Jason Aaron books and even like some of the Journey to Mystery stuff from back in the day, is more serious and is this ancient being just like Teth-Adam, who would have a more similar perspective to Black Adam. And if they ever did this crossover between Thor and Shazam, I've always thought it would be a very interesting thing, because Thor would probably relate to and understand Black Adam more than Shazam. So if you put all three of these characters in a movie together, it would be interesting to explore. But getting into what Mr. DC Comics is saying is, yes, a recurring mistake, especially these days in the MCU, is, and I remember the word I was thinking of before, comic relief. Thor is recurringly, especially in the team-based stories, used as a comic relief character. And while he is good for comic relief, probably one of Thor's most famous scenes in any movie is when he has that drink at the cafe and goes, "This is delicious, another," and then smashes it on the floor. Fish out of watery stuff works well for Thor's comedy. But he is, to me, and I feel like to most people, an epic character. Like, if you know him from the comics, the first thing I think of when I think of Thor is like an epic. Literally in that term of like an old genre kind of thing, where he's going on a big adventure. It's almost like a Beowulf style adventure where you're fighting something monstrous and kind of like ethereal or surreal. That's what a lot of older Journey into Mystery books were, or like I said, the Jason Aaron books kind of get into that, or even just the nature of, like when I say epic, of like King Thor battling Galactus and tearing our solar system apart in the process. Stuff like that worked really well, and I think is kind of Thor at his best. And it also, I think, nicely compares to the kind of stuff we might get out of Black Adam. They are different characters, they are going for different things. Black Adam, interestingly, is inherently more political. And again, I do appreciate how this movie didn't really shy away from those politics. It made it less Americanized. Like, it's not so much about American colonial powers so much as just colonialism in general. And I like that because it's not all America. Like, this is much more of a European thing. And it's also interesting because in the context of Kahndaq, it's in the context of Kahndaq as a modern nation, which, like any modern nation, would have like and by modern nation I mean one that's been constantly dealing with political upheaval, like Kahndaq, having this like rotating wheelhouse of different superpowers trying to like take control of it. I'm thinking of Afghanistan, but there's a lot of other countries just like it, and that's clearly what they were going for with Kahndaq. And all of that really worked. All from someone who is, by the way, not Middle Eastern, but Pacific Islander. But and I was my girlfriend brought that up when we were driving home last night, and not even in a critical way. We were just talking about it, and it's just like, and I was saying, yeah, it's interesting because even if you look at the actual cast of everyone cast for Kahndaq, they're all pretty clearly Arabic by their names and stuff. But for the case of Black Adam being played by a Pacific Islander in the form of Dwayne Johnson, I haven't heard anyone object to it, and I don't feel like anyone should because he just looks the part so thoroughly. And I feel like he did a really great job at portraying someone of a slightly different ethnicity than his own. It's always a tricky business with that one, but in the case of Dwayne Johnson, I think people get it. And long before he said anything, I feel like it's just always worked that it's like, hey, he would make a cool Black Adam. Like anyone who's read the Black Adam books, especially in the modern age, should be able to see that. I think it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy because I assume at a certain point at least some DC artists were using The Rock as a reference point, but I don't know. It's just he was such an interesting performer because I'm used to someone from like the Hobbs and Shaw world or some of the other like Fast and Furious kind of movies where he's more jokey and doesn't really go anywhere deeper than that. He's just kind of like buff action guy, can rip off his cast in Fast and the Furious and stuff like that. And I've never really gotten much more out of him as an actor in most of his movies. But this one, even compared to some of Rock's, like, I keep calling him that, but I really am trying to do Dwayne Johnson. Even compared to Johnson's, like, better roles over the year, I never have quite seen him like this. He really was showing a lot of different flavors. He was able to pull off the comedy really well, but also just the drama of it all, of someone whose family lived 5,000 years ago and are all dust now, and what would, like, how would a person react to that? It's hard to depict, and I think he did such a good job at it. Like, he really was able to give the character that nuance that I expect from the comics, for that take of this character that they totally delivered here. Yeah, solid movie. If somehow you've gone through this whole review and haven't seen it yet, I assume most people who are watching this have either seen it or don't care about spoilers and stuff, but I do recommend you see it. I don't know if it's necessary to see it in theaters, in that, like, you know, you'll have a good time no matter what kind of thing, but I enjoyed it in theaters. It might be worth seeing in theaters just for that post-credit scene. Be careful what you Google, because I wasn't spoiled on this, luckily. I actually managed to get it fresh. I did see it like within a day of it coming out, which helped, but I was Googling Black Adam movie and then looking the cast up, and there's a spoiler right there. All right, and I think, yeah, that's a good way to permanently not be part of this chat, Clashers World. That's funny. Anyways, all right. So, like I said, I kind of ran out of stuff to talk about probably like 5 or 6 minutes ago. I just wanted to kind of talk to the people in chat a bit, but someone was being weird in chat. What did they write exactly? Oh yeah, soy boys. Just automatic ban at that point. Like, unless you're using it ironically, you're just ridiculous. But I will say this about the comment I deleted. Someone's like, oh, like, soy boys love She-Hulk but hate Black Adam. A, do those people exist? I don't know. But also B, is there a reason you can't like both things? I liked She-Hulk enough for what it was, but it's like a goofy legal drama, and this was a major blockbuster beast of a movie. So I don't know what people are talking about. Like, obviously it's fair to compare something like Love and Thunder to Black Adam, but comparing She-Hulk to this is stupid on a few levels. Mainly, like, just that they're completely... It would be like comparing that Peacemaker show that came out earlier to this. Guess what? This movie doesn't look as good as Peacemaker either. Oh, I wonder why. So ridiculous. But anyways, I just, some people are full of hot takes out there, and I'm sure there will be plenty for Black Adam. But I thought it was so good. Even his costume. I'm just kind of looking at it flash by. Most of it is in that kind of darkened lightning bolts we see, but the way they kind of go about all of that and bring about kind of Black Adam in the modern age, I think was really well done and makes sense for its story. And yeah, that's just one of the many... I was talking earlier about how much I love the details of this movie, and this movie's full of great details. That just reminded me of the other one, when we're seeing Black Adam first being created by the Wizards. I thought it was cool that we see most of them dying when they try and like banish Black Adam, and the only one that survives is the Wizard we know from the Shazam movie. Little connections like that, I think, will go a long way down the road into building up like Shazam and Black Adam's relationship and stuff when that eventually does happen. But like I said earlier, the cool thing is they don't seem to be in a rush to do that. That doesn't appear to be happening this year at all. As far as I can tell, like, we are... whenever that crossover is going to happen, it's probably going to be in Black Adam sequel, or maybe even in a third Shazam movie, or maybe even in some weird Clash movie. Or alternatively, they're going to meet in some entirely different movie, some sort of Justice League story or something like that. So, I don't know where they're going with all of this. But with that post-credit scene and with this movie being so strong, and perhaps, like Mr. DC Comics said, with new people kind of being in charge over at DC, maybe this being a really good sign of where the DCEU is going from here, I am very optimistic. Like, we'll say very... Well, I'm going to switch that, actually. I'm cautiously optimistic that whatever we're going to get going forward is going to be fun. And I am looking forward to it, because so far, DC's done a great job with Black Adam, and maybe we'll leave it with that. Okay, so I've been wrapping up again for like another 5 minutes, so I think we're good there. But thank you so much, everyone who tuned in. We got a good number of viewers throughout this, which is always pretty fun. I'm gonna try and do at least one more stream today, if not another, because, well, I want to give a little attention to Marvel, but after we do that, I want to try out that new video game DC also put out this weekend. So stay tuned, guys. I'll try and figure out a schedule. The little doggy that's lying down over there probably needs to go out for a walk, but oh shoot. Oh good, he didn't hear that. That's trouble I'm looking for there. But I do have to kind of do something on his behalf. But yeah, after that, I might hop back on for another stream. So keep an eye out. Hopefully I can pull that off. And thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed.